talk to a group of non-church people with a moving apology for all the dehumanizing wrongs perpetrated by the church in the name of Christ, from anti-Semitic pogroms to denying and covering up sexual abuse to demonizing Muslims. With Peter, the church has consistently misunderstood the powerlessness that goes with the justice and love of the God whose Messiah Jesus really is, and has constantly betrayed Jesus by linking Jesus with self-serving, mean-spirited, oppressive powers. People like Carlos Fuentes and Lincoln and my friend and countless others who are alienated from the church give me pause. There may be indeed dogmatic, full of themselves anti-church types out there whose books become bestsellers. But there are also countless others whose integrity and understanding of Jesus turn them off when it comes to church, and with whom I find myself standing very often when it comes to issues of peace and justice and respecting every human being. More than once I have asked myself, why bother? And here's my personal answer that I think is in line with this whole gospel story. At the heart of what the church is are the Bible and the Eucharist. And at the heart of the Bible and the Eucharist is Jesus, quietly and persistently just being God's Messiah, down there under all the layers of irrelevant and even satanic stuff in which we keep trying to clothe him. And when I let the Bible and the Eucharist do their thing on me, I catch glimpses of, find myself relating to that Jesus. Bumbling, pretentious, blasphemous, sinful as it is, the church and its gospel and its sacraments are the medium through which Jesus gets to me. Tradition is the process through which that happens. And tradition is an interesting word. It comes from the Latin traditio, of which the New Testament Greek equivalent is paradosis. Both those, the root meaning of both those words is to hand over, to hand something over. They can mean that in the sense of deliver, as handing along the story of Jesus in the Bible and the Eucharist. But they can also mean to hand over in the sense of betray. And that double entendre of the word tradition beautifully describes how Jesus is both brought to me and at the same time betrayed and defiled in the way the church handles Jesus. And so the word tradition conveys the sense in which the glass is continually half full and half empty. And what makes me come out on the half-full side is that God, in Jesus and through the whole Bible, God seems to want it that ambiguous way. Or at least that ambiguous way is okay with God. Jesus angrily rebuked Peter for not getting it, but still, obviously, he kept Peter with him. to the cross and the resurrection. Jesus stood there alone in Pilate's house, in the high priest's house. Jesus stood there alone, betrayed and deserted by everyone, including Peter. But when the rooster had crowed the third time, Peter looked lovingly at Jesus there on the edge of the crowd, and the relationship kept going. In that final exchange I alluded to, Jesus, knowing full well Peter's almost manic, depressive volatility, said Peter was the rock and bade him, "Feed my lambs, feed my sheep, feed my sheep." And in the book of Acts, Jesus did not disown Peter for his anti-Gentile proclivities, but gave him a vision and patiently brought him around and used Peter in including Gentiles in the church. The gospel's good news is not that Jesus is now, after the resurrection, finally above and beyond and untouched by earthly, human, material stuff. The good news of the gospel is that God has so chosen to take on that stuff, has so chosen to be human in Jesus, that abstract, theoretical, theistic theory is out of touch with reality. The gospel's good news is that God's choice is absolutely thorough, unqualified, without qualification. It continues to operate when Jesus has handed things over, in both senses of the word, to Peter and the church. The church is now, for better or for worse, Jesus' body. God so loves the world that God is willing to risk having God's reputation at the mercy of an outfit like the church. God in Jesus is there for us precisely in a tradition that both betrays Jesus and makes Jesus available to us at the same time. And if you think you're so pure that you can't abide that, you're purer than God chooses to be. Precisely in being at the mercy of Peter and the church and you and me is Jesus present in the world as God's crucified Messiah. And that is what redeems the church, redeems Peter, redeems you and me as church. It is Satan speaking when Jesus is understood as powerful, conquering, victorious, transcendent Messiah. It is not flesh and blood, but God revealing God's exquisite, redemptive secret when human, member of the local carpenter's family, crucified Jesus is understood to be God's Messiah. Peter didn't get that, but Jesus kept at him. Again and again, the church doesn't get that. And again, you, well, at least I, don't get it. But Jesus keeps after me, keeps after the church, keeps after us. And that's what I see in this glass half full and at the same time glass half empty story of Peter, which has to do with the church and you and me as well as Peter. And what's happening right now as we, gathered as church, as we celebrate this Eucharist, is that Jesus is keeping after us. Let's let him. For heaven's sakes, let's let him.